Welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Carrie Altman. I'm the Director of Outreach and Community Programming at the Nathan and Esther Peltz Holocaust Education Resource Center, otherwise known as HERC, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. HERC's mission is dedicated to the building of a society based on the values of tolerance, diversity, dignity, and respect toward all human beings. HERC teaches these lessons to students, educators, and community members every day throughout the state of Wisconsin and beyond. Thank you to all of you watching tonight for your continued support of HERC's mission. Tonight's program, Bridging History, Generational Conversations of the Holocaust, is the first program in a new series featuring Holocaust survivors interviewed by high school students. HERC is thrilled to be presenting this program in partnership with BBYO Wisconsin Region and Nicolet High School. Our special guest this evening is Holocaust survivor, Dr. Werner Richheimer, accompanied by his lovely wife, Carol. Dr. Richheimer has spoken as a member of HERC's Speakers Bureau for many years. We feel so honored that he is willing to share his courageous story of survival with us tonight. He was born in Germany in 1937 and survived 2 concentration camps in France with his family. Years later, he became a dentist and practiced general dentistry for 52 years. We also are grateful to Ava Wales, a senior at Nicolet High School and a member of BBYO Wisconsin Region, for conducting the pre-recorded interview with Dr. Richheimer. Immediately following the interview, there will be a live virtual Q&A moderated by Ava. So please post your questions or comments in the comments section on Facebook anytime throughout the presentation. And now, it is an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Werner Richheimer and Ava Wales.
Was brought upon all of the Jews in Germany. And my grandfather had a kosher meat market on the first floor of the building that we lived in. My sister, my mother and father, and I lived on the second floor, and my grandparents lived on the third floor. On the night of Kristallnacht,
I'm so sorry.
Was
it doesn't look like there was sound in the beginning, so I'm going to restart it.
I'm Ava Wales, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to interview Holocaust survivor, Dr. Werner Richheimer. Thank you all for joining us. So, Dr. Richheimer, can you please tell me about yourself and your upbringing and your life in general?
My life from the time I was born,
yes,
to the present. We would have
tell us about your experience in the Holocaust.
I was born in Karlsruhe, Germany in 1937, October 8th. 1 year before the Holocaust. In 1938, in 1938, Kristallnacht was brought upon all of the Jews in Germany, and my grandfather had a kosher meat market on the first floor of the building that we lived in. My sister, my mother and father, and I lived on the second floor, and my grandparents lived on the third floor. On the night of Kristallnacht, the store was ransacked, destroyed by the Gestapo. And our synagogue, which we always went to, was destroyed, was burned. Our Torah scrolls, our prayer books were taken outside and were burned in front of the synagogue. From that point on, life was different for people that were Jewish and living in Germany. The Jews had to wear stars on their apparel, either on their arms or on their jackets if they were wearing a jacket in the front. There were yellow stars, six-sided stars, so that other people would know that we were Jewish. Our friends were no longer our friends because our friends were afraid to be seen with us. We couldn't go outside when we wanted to. We were allowed to go to grocery stores at certain times and certain days of the week. We couldn't ride the transit. My sister, who was in school at the time, and she was 8 years older than I was, she had to stay home from school. Jewish children were not allowed to go to school anymore. And this was in 1939. In 1940, the Gestapo came to our house and rang the doorbell and asked my parents our names. And they told the Gestapo, 3 officers that came there, our names, and my grandparents were above us. They had to give them their names. We were told to go outside in front of the building. We could take a few things along. We couldn't take any money or jewelry or anything of value along. We were told that we would never go back to our home. This was not going to be our home anymore. And that we should assemble on the outside of the building, where we noticed there were hundreds of other Jews also waiting. From there, they took us to the school where my sister used to go to. And there were large army trucks that were waiting to take us to the train station. We then went to, they took us to the train station. We waited until nightfall at the train station. And the train pulled in. The train was a train of cattle cars. Cattle cars are like box cars, but they have slots cut into the side of the car so that when they transport cattle, they get air. They don't suffocate from the time that they're put into the cars to the time that they actually go to the slaughterhouse. Well, the Jews were the cattle that they put on these cars. They forced us into these cars. There were no windows. There were no lights. There was no heat. It was cold. It was, they eventually, before they closed the doors, they put 2 pails in on each side of the door, one pail on each side of the door for bathroom purposes. And they closed the door and they locked the door. Eventually, the train started moving. There were a lot of people, a lot of older people that collapsed. There were people that died on the train. And that was at night. And then the following morning, the train stopped, and the doors opened, and we were all allowed to leave the cars. And outside the cars, they gave us a cup of water and a piece of dry bread. And then there was an announcement made that the men could not re-enter the cars. So my mother and father were upset. They were worried. All the women and the children went back onto the cars that we came off of, and the men stood outside as the train pulled out. We were on this train for 3 days and 2 nights before we came to our first concentration camp called GURS, G-U-R-S. It's a large camp. When we got off the train, there were officers sitting at desks in front of the line that we were forming, and we noticed that there was a train that followed our train behind us, and the men that got off the train on the first stop were now coming off the train off the second train. From that point on, my mother and father never saw each other again. They never spoke to each other again. And they told us to form 3 lines. The first line was for women and children. So my mother and my sister and I were in the first line. The second line were for able-bodied men that got off the second train. And the third line was for elderly people or handicapped people. Mind you, these are all Jewish people, obviously. And the third line was told to stay where they were. And we were told we followed a leader that took us to a large building. And we got onto the building, and they told us to take all of our clothes off. And we went through like an assembly line. There were a couple of people that shaved our hair, shaved all of our hair off. Second person that we saw, they gave us a cold shower. And the third person put some white powder on our bodies. And they gave us like pajama top and bottom. They were thin, they were cotton, they're black and white striped. And from there, they took us to our barracks. And the men went to a different building. We didn't know where they went. But when we got to our barracks, there were hundreds of barracks there. This was a huge camp. And it was surrounded by electrified barbed wire fences. So that if you touched it, you were electrocuted. If you tried to escape, that was what was going to happen to you. They told us that before we got there. And thank you. We walked into the barracks. There was one door on one end. It was guarded by a German soldier with a machine gun and a German Shepherd dog. Inside the barracks, there were no beds, there were no cots, there were no blankets, there were no pillows. It was just the entire floor was covered with straw. And we were confined to the barracks the entire day and the entire night. The only time we were allowed to leave the barracks was in the morning for roll call. The Germans were very good at that. They called everybody's name off. They knew which barrack you were on. You had not a social security number, but you had a number that was assigned to you. And after that was done, they gave us our breakfast, which was a cup of water and a piece of dry bread. And they took us back to our barracks. We did that twice a day, in the morning and at night. There was no break in the afternoon. I was not the only child there. There were probably, I have no idea how many children were there, but these were just for women and children, the barracks that we were in. And there were a lot of rats and mice that were in the barracks, and especially in the wintertime. They had windows, but the windows were high up on the wall. You could hear what was going on outside, but you couldn't see it. A lot of the windows were broken. So in the wintertime, it got really cold in there. We had no blankets, nothing to keep us warm, other than the pajamas that we were wearing. We were infested with lice, and with the rats and the mice, of course, were running around. So a lot of people got sick, dysentery, typhoid. I had a very severe ear infection when I was in, I don't remember if it was the first year or the second year we were in this camp. I had pus running out of my ear at the time. But we had doctors there, but they couldn't help us because they had nothing with them they had no medications, they had no instruments, they had nothing. They were there just like we were there. We were in that camp for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, one thing I'd like to mention, children were allowed to visit their fathers. The fathers were in a separate part of the camp. My father was doing hard labor. He was breaking rocks. He was building latrines. They had grave sites that were dug up by the men. Before, when we got off the train, we found out later that, remember I said there were 3 rows. The third row were older people, so forth. My grandparents were in that line, and they were taken to the field. Apparently, somebody had dug some graves out there, and they were killed there, and they fell into the graves, and they covered them up. And that's why we found this out a long, long time after that. We never found out what happened. But the guards would let the children visit their fathers every once in a while, every few weeks. You could spend an hour with my father. And when we did that, my mother had questions that my sister would ask my father, and my father would answer the questions and ask questions of my sister to ask my mother. So that's how they kind of stayed in contact with one another. But it wasn't a bodily contact. So we were there for 2 years, and there was an announcement made that families with children would probably find it more accommodating if we transferred them to a different camp, which was near the Spanish border. The Spanish Mountain was near there. This was all in France, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. The train that took us from Germany to France, and that's where the rest of our lives started. But both of the camps, Gers, the first camp, the second camp was called River Soltis. River Soltis was different from Gers. It was a camp that was built not with wood barracks, but with concrete block barracks, which were actually colder in the wintertime. But there, the sleeping conditions were different. Instead of sleeping on the floor on hay, we were sleeping in cubicles, wooden cubicles that were of two layers. The lower part, and then 4 feet up was an upper part. my mother, my sister and I were on the lower area, and another family with children were over on top of us. And the meals were very much the same as what we had in Paris. Water and dry bread. We were there for about a year before something miraculous happened. There was a organization in England that tried to go into France and save some of the Jewish children that were incarcerated there. And they came to River Saltis. And my parents were given the option of us leaving them. And my sister, of course, she was 8 years older. I was now 6 years old at the time. She was 14. She knew that we would never see our parents again. She didn't want to go. And I didn't want to go because she didn't want to go. But at the same time, they realized that their future was not much longer, and they wanted us to have a chance to live. So they insisted we left, and we did. The Quakers took us from River Saltis to a children's home not too far from where the camp was, and we were there for about 6 months. We had an aunt and uncle in Switzerland who were very well-to-do. They had a number of department stores in different countries, and they were working with the underground, the French underground, who were fighting the Germans in France. They gave them money, they gave them food, they gave them clothing, they gave them whatever they needed to fight the Germans. And when they found out through the Red Cross that we had been released, they went to the underground and they said, my niece and nephew are somewhere in France. You have to find them. And it took them 6 months to find us. They went to all the children's homes, all the orphanages, and they came to the one that we were in. And they took us away. We came in a truck, which had an open back and was filled with hay, and a lot of hay. And they put us in underneath the hay and told us to stay close to the cab of the truck, because the German soldiers would take pitchforks, and sometimes because other people were taking children away, Jewish children away, and they wanted to get rid of them, not avoid letting them escape. So we were stopped once. They did use the pitchforks, but we were far enough back, they didn't touch us. So they took us to a home that had other children there also. These were righteous husband and wife, French, who were working with the underground, and they were saving and hiding children so that the Germans would not find them and kill them. And we were hidden in their cellar. My aunt and uncle, in the meantime, their daughter and son-in-law lived in Geneva. And Geneva is adjacent to France. It borders France. And my son-in-law was an attorney. He drew up some papers for us, got us visas, and made arrangements with the people that were hiding us. We were there for about 6 weeks until all these arrangements were finally made. And they took us on a bicycle. The wife had a bicycle, my husband had a bicycle. I was in the back of one, and my sister was on the back of the other one. They took us pitch darkness to the Swiss border. It was about 5 kilometers from where they were living on the farm. And there were guards on the Swiss side and on the French side. And my cousins were on the other side. They had envelopes of money that they dispensed to the guards. The guards handed us, the Swiss guard handed us the French guard handed us to the Swiss guard, and we were free. And from that point on, life changed. We started, we tried eating, we couldn't eat. Our digestive systems had shut down, and everything that we ate came back up. After 3 years, we finally had some food, and yet we couldn't eat, we couldn't keep it down. So they put us in the hospital for 6 weeks. They put us on feeding tubes and got our digestive systems to start working. And they did that, and then we were in Switzerland for 3 years. My aunt and uncle, because of the business and where they were located, they were in a tourist area. There weren't very many good schools there. They found a Jewish family in a small town in Switzerland near Lucerne that had 3 children of their own. He was a doctor, came here with his family before the war, and but needed money. So they paid this doctor a stipend to take care of us, to feed us, take care of our clothing and so forth. And we got along really well with them and with their children. And whenever there was a time off of school, what do you call it? Vacation time, summer, winter, whatever. They would pick us up, and we would go to their home, and we would stay with them. Other family members, some lived in Zurich, some lived in Lugano, some lived in other areas of the country, Geneva. And so we stayed with them for 3 years until our visas ran out. And we had to make a decision. My family in Switzerland wanted us to stay there and become citizens of Switzerland. My mother had a sister who immigrated to America before I was actually born, to start a new life and hopefully sponsor the rest of the family to come over. We needed a sponsor to get out of Germany. We needed someone who had money to take care of you. Otherwise, the Americans wouldn't allow you to enter the States here. So she went first, and then afterwards, she couldn't. She had a hard time. She had a hard time here. You can imagine coming to a foreign country. You don't know the language. You don't know anybody here. Her cousin was here. She's the one that sponsored her. But she lived in, and my aunt sponsored her fiance in Germany, who came here. And then they got married. And eventually they wound up in Milwaukee. And they wanted us to come to America, and they wanted to be they wanted to be parents to us. They wanted us to grow up here. My aunt and uncle in Switzerland wanted us to stay there. It was kind of a communication between the two of them, and my aunt finally convinced them that this was the place for them as far as the future is concerned. So they put us on a plane, and we flew overseas, landed in New York. I had some cousins there, and then eventually we wound up in Milwaukee. I went to school here. My sister, about a year and a half after we arrived here, she met the love of her life, and he was from Germany, and they got married, and they have two sons. One is living in Israel, The other son is actually living out east right now. And I eventually went to Marquette, became a dentist and practiced for 50 some years, and retired about 8 years ago. So that's my story. We have 4 children, 12 grandchildren. We are very lucky, and unfortunately, the rest of the people, in my family all perished. And that's kind of my story.
Well, thank you for telling us your story. Before Kristallnacht and before you were sent to the camps, did your family try to leave the country and move to either Israel or America or any other country that would take you?
Yes. Unfortunately, you had to have a visa in Germany to get out of Germany. They gave those visas out to people that had numbers that were called. All the Jews were given numbers, and if they were, and every, I don't know how frequently these numbers were called, but my aunt, who was my mother's sister and 10 years younger than she was, had a number that was called early, and that's why she decided to leave. Unfortunately, my parents had numbers also, but they were much higher numbers. They were never called before the Gestapo took us away into the concentration camps.
And was Kristallnacht your first encounter with anti-Semitism, or were there ones before that?
Well, I was very young at the time. My sister would know a little bit more about that. Unfortunately, she passed away about 20 some years ago. She had ovarian cancer, and she didn't survive. Luckily, her 2 boys that we are very close with, we do things together and we see each other whenever we can. He's a doctor, went to medical school in Madison, and eventually made Aliyah to Israel 30 years ago, how long that was. But, and they have 13 children though? They have 16 grandchildren. 16 grandchildren. No, but they have 6 children. 6 children, thank you. Okay, 6 children. So we're very fortunate in that respect. You didn't have any. But to answer your question about Kristallnacht, no, I did not know very much about Kristallnacht until I was much older.
And how did you cope with the experiences you had in the camp? Because at the time you were very young, but you must have known what was going on to a certain degree.
I did, but and some of the things I still remember. I really do. I wish I didn't, but I do. But my sister, when we crossed the border into Switzerland, she wrote a diary. The diary, we were not even aware that there was a diary. But the family that we were living with in that little town in Switzerland, my Aunt Malka found for us to take care of us, and we attended school there and so forth. They had 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy, and long after we left Switzerland, they found a diary that my sister wrote in German, and it was translated into English. And a lot of the things that I'm talking to you about were in that diary. I should have mentioned that earlier. But it was, I still have a copy of it. when we were in Hergesville, or this little town, there were not too many Jews that lived there. But the Jewish family that we did live with were very Orthodox. And Friday night, the lights were left on until Sunday. The cooking was done ahead of time. Saturday morning, we walked from Hergesville to Lucerne, which was about 9-10 kilometers, which is about 5-6 miles. And it was on every Saturday, whether it was summer or winter. We went to synagogue there, we prayed, walked back, and then had a big meal for lunch. That was kind of hard. That's one of the things I really remember.
She asked you about the kids, but you remember the mice. Remember the little mice crawling around them?
Well, yeah, I mentioned that before, but you asked me what I remember, how much I remember of
the camp.
Of what? Well, are you talking about just the camps themselves? I didn't get that right.
Well, within the camps, like how did you keep hope necessarily?
Keep hope?
Well, there was no hope.
Or if you tried to.
There was no hope. Like I said before, the windows were high up, and you could hear what was going on outside. You could hear screaming, you could hear rifle shots and that sort of thing. But you really, I never knew what was going on outside. I think that purposely they built it like that. The only thing I remember was being very cold and very hungry. When we were in the children's home, when the Quakers took us from the camp, Riversalt, to the home that we stayed at for 6 months. There, my sister, because she was older, was asked if she wanted to take care of some of the children there. There were maybe 80 or 90. Most of them were Spanish-speaking children there, because this camp was close to the Spanish border. And she said, of course she would. She'd love to. So they gave us a room that was quite large, and there were 8 children that she took care of. And when they gave us this room, they said to her, you know, we want to give you something. They gave her 100 francs. And she said, well, I don't want any money. But she said, but if you could give me some yarn, some knitting needles, I'd like to make something for the children to be warm in the wintertime. So they found that for her. They went out to get it, and she made mittens and scarves and hats and sweaters for children, for myself.
How does a 14-year-old girl know how to do all this?
Exactly.
She never made anything for herself.
She must have learned very young from her mother.
That's the kind of person she was.
Yeah.
She never worried about herself. She always worried about everybody else that was around her. And during the day, she would take us out in the prairie outside the home, and she noticed that the cattle were out there grazing, and she said, "No, look at the cattle. They're eating all this green, the green leaves and the dandelions." And she says, "I'm going to try." We were really very hungry, and we were very starved, even though we were in this home. This home was in the area of the German troops. So the German patrols would stop there. They would take food from the home that they were supposed to be given to the children and to the adults. And they would take the food away from there. So we were still hungry. So she started eating a couple of these dandelion leaves. Not the stem, because it has a white liquid in it, which is poisonous. But she noticed that was not bothersome to her. She could digest that. It didn't bother her. So then she started letting me have some of those also. And that kind of helped us. It wasn't wonderful, but it kept us alive. And so those are the kind of things I do remember. Once we got to the family, the husband and wife that did us, we were in a cellar down below, and there was a trap door to the cellar, that was covered by a rug, and she had her sewing machine on top of that. Because the German patrols, this was a farm, remember? So this German patrols would come there during the day and they'd take the food from the farm. And so they would always come inside and say, well, you know, who are you hiding? Where are the Jews that you're hiding? And this was in my sister's diary. And they said, you know how you look around, there's nothing here. You're taking our food from us. And so anyway, so patrols were never out in the nighttime. So they felt comfortable letting us come upstairs after nightfall. And then we would stay upstairs with them. And then we would go back downstairs and go to sleep downstairs and stay there the rest of the day. She would bring some food down to us during the day once we knew that there were no patrols around. But we stayed there for about 6 or 8 weeks until the arrangements were made. So these were Christians. They took their lives in their own hands in trying to save some Jewish children. You have to really give them a lot of credit. If they were caught with children or Jews, whether they were children or not, wouldn't have made any difference. They would have been shot on the spot. So, anything else?
Yeah, so you said that when you were in the camps, you stayed in your building all day.
We
Why
were not.
did you pass the time?
That's the time. We had no toys. We had nothing.
Yeah.
There was, it's like, I can't explain it, except that when you're not eating food, you become very tired and very weak because your body is saying, send me something, give me something. I can't. A lot of people slept. I probably slept also. And there were some kids that were running around with the mice and the rats. But I didn't do that because I was afraid of rats. Not too fond of mice either, but so the time just passed, I guess. I don't know. There were no choices. There were no choices. You know, it's something like they lock you up in a cell and they close the door. You're there until somebody unlocks it. So that's kind of the way it was. It wasn't wonderful, but it was, we survived for 3 years anyway.
And how were you selected as one of the 25 kids that could leave the camp?
We don't know that. We don't have an answer for that. All we know is that my parents were, my mother was contacted and said, this is what's going to happen on Saturday. And we're allowing 25 children to leave the camp. If you want your children to leave, you have to let us know, and we will make arrangements with the people that. So that's how it was. And there were other children that were leaving at the same time. We left. That's all. I don't know what they gave the German guards or the commandant of the camp, whether it was money or whether it was something else. Maybe it was liquor. I have no idea. So,
And
by
the time you were my age, I'm 17 at the moment, you'd already experienced so many things that no one should ever go through, and you were living in Milwaukee at the time. So did it make you stick out in any way?
Did it make you what?
Did it make you stick out your experiences?
Stick out your experiences.
Like when you lived in Milwaukee, were you different than everyone else because of what you had gone through?
No.
I don't think so. I probably appreciated things more than some of the people, my people that I went to school with and so forth. We took things for granted. I mean, let's face it. If you haven't experienced anything like that, they had a roof over their head. They had a family. They had a house. They had children. They could go outside and do what they wanted to do. I didn't grow up that way. I did eventually, but I mean, I was much. That's my dog. I was much older by the time I had that kind of lifestyle. It was a different way of growing up. Unfortunately, my parents, we found out much later what happened to my parents, and they were taken to Auschwitz from Riversaltis. That was their next camp after we left them. And I always thought to myself, if we hadn't left them, would they have been taken to Auschwitz? I don't know. I don't know that. But my mother was so weak and undernourished. She had diabetes, and of course there was no insulin. So she was worse off than maybe some of the other women. But she died on the train to Auschwitz. My father made it all the way to Auschwitz, and he was there for 1 week before he was put in the gas chamber. So it's probably garbage.
Oh, yes, it is.
Anyway.
Have you been to Europe since, in particular, Germany as well?
We actually took our children back. We had 4 children. When they were young, back in the 70s.
Yeah.
You said Europe. Did you mean?
Europe, but especially Germany.
Okay, we did go back. My aunt, by the way, lived to 102 and a half years old. She was a wonderful person, and very bright, very sharp lady. She made me promise never to go back to Germany. Before she died, she died about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And she was 102 and a half years old. And she had two husbands. So anyway, so she made me promise not to go back to Germany. My nephew in Israel and my other nephew here, and my kids also said, Dad, can we go back to Germany? Can we go to Germany? Would you go to Germany? And I said, no, I can't. I really can't do that. And then they kind of hemmed and hawed, and eventually I said, okay, we'll go. So we did. We made a nice trip out of it. We went back to the home that we lived in. The house was still standing. It looked just like the picture I have of my grandmother or my parents somehow my aunt gave me that picture, a black and white picture of the house. My father holding me on his lap on the porch outside. Anyway, but the 60 years later, 70 years later, it was the same. And we were not able to get inside. We were there on a Sunday, but we hired a guide to take us around. We rented a van, and we went to grave sites of my aunt and uncle and cousins that died earlier in Germany, and my nephews, said prayers for them. And we went to Berlin also because his grandfather, his uncle,
your sister's husband
my sister's husband's family
was from
had
Berlin.
moved to Berlin, and he wanted to go there, and I said, of course, we'll go to Berlin. So anyway, so we went there and spent about 2 weeks all together. It was a very nice trip. I'd never go back again, but it was a hard trip. It was too many memories.
Thank you so much. And our final question, but what do you believe I and other people in my generation and generations to come can do to fight indifferences and hatred and anti-Semitism and all other prejudices against people?
What was your question, Eva?
What do you believe I and other people my age can do to fight indifference and anti-Semitism and hatred?
You know what? That's a hard question because there's no easy answer, as you know. For probably 50 years, I could not talk about my story. Some very close friends of mine that were members of the Federation, JCC, asked me often, would you talk to classes and so forth? I said, I can't. I just can't. Until I went back to Germany and came back, and I met somebody in the grocery store again, and she said, are you ready now? I said, yes, I'm ready. I'll do it. I'm not going to enjoy doing it, but I'm going to do it. Because I think it's so important for kids and adults to know what went on over there firsthand from a person that was there, not from some article that they may have read or a book that they may have read. It's just very hard. And the first few times I went, Carol came along with me. She was my support. And I found out that kids really, really enjoyed listening to it. They came up to me afterwards and they gave me hugs. They were just beside themselves. I've spoken a lot to synagogues, congregations, that sort of thing. So, but most of my speaking, and I really asked for that, is to 8th and 9th graders. Because I want them to, and they have to have a background of the Holocaust first before I talk to them. So they know what we're talking about, what era we're talking about, what kind of happened over there, so far as how the Nazis got into power and what happened after they did, the camps, and what happened to the Jews, that sort of thing. And I guess after a while, I felt better about doing it because I think it was just important for them to hear that firsthand.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Werner, and your amazing wife, Carol, for speaking with me today and sharing your story. It means so much to all of us. And for those watching, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment sections on Facebook and we will answer them. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Werner. It's really been a great time hearing your story and learning from you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Okay,
So, Dr. Richheimer, we're now going to go into the Q&A, and I have a couple of questions from the audience. So this is from Michelle. Are the two camps or remnants of the camps still there in France?
Okay.
Eva, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Would you
Okay.
repeat that question, Ava?
Of course. So are the two camps or any remnants of the camps still there in France?
I don't know about River Saltis, but Gers is still there. I saw pictures of it, of the camp. I mean, it's 50, 60 years, but or longer than that. I, you know, when you're there as a prisoner, you look at a camp differently than you do from a picture. So it brings back memories to people that were there, if they're still living. And it's a very large camp. That's all I can tell you. It was just rows and rows and rows of cabins and buildings, not cabins. Well, they're cabins. They're all wood. They're not waterproof, and they're not winterproof. They had no heat. They had no air conditioning. They had nothing. They didn't have a toilet. The toilet was a pail that was put in pails that were put by the door during the night, so because they wouldn't allow anyone to leave the cabin when it was dark out.
Thank you. And obviously you have your amazing wife, Carol, next to you. So Susan was wondering, how did you two meet?
Well, how long do you have? Actually, when I was going through dental school, the alumni had a dinner dance every year that they invited the Jewish students to attend, and with dates. And it was the one I remember more vividly is the one that I met my wife Carol at. We went out a couple times before
Literally, it was a blind date.
It was a blind date. It started off as a blind date, but it turned into something much more. So this was in Lake Burlington, in Burlington, Wisconsin. Cerami's Resort. It was beautiful, it really was.
Okay, that's it.
And it was a nice evening.
It was a dinner dance, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, this was an international Jewish dental fraternity. Yeah. And the alumni always invited the undergraduates to attend.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay.
How old were you when you arrived in New York?
9 years old. February 9th, I think. February 9th, 1947.
And when he came to Milwaukee, we had a huge snowstorm.
Oh, yes.
He had never seen snow like that.
We came from Switzerland where all the snow in the world is falling. But that was a very bad storm. There were no trolleys running, the buses were not running, people were not driving. It was a wonderful day.
Thank you. And can you share the story about how you found the Bible that had your name in it?
Oh,
that's
okay.
Another story that we don't know very much about.
Can I tell you? Because he wasn't home. When I got a call from someone who worked at, we were members of Congregation with Israel, and Susie Peltz called. She worked in the office, and she said that she just opened up a prayer book, and it had the name Werner Richheimer in it, but it was all in German. Well, a woman had come to the office, and evidently it wasn't a Jewish woman, but she knew that you had to bury a prayer book. So she brought it to the office, and at that time we were just in between our regular employees, and the person that took it from her didn't recognize her. And anyways, and so Susie called to tell me about the book, and we went to pick it up, and I still have it here. Of course, it was very mind-boggling. It was his signature in the prayer book that he used when he went to this Orthodox synagogue when they lived in Hegesville, which is outside of Lucerne in Switzerland. So it was his prayer book, and he didn't want me to call the television station or find out, if we could find out who would have brought that. And years later, we thought that maybe it was found in a home where his sister and brother-in-law lived, and they had rented in this flat, and it may have been left in the basement or something, and someone brought it to the synagogue.
We have no idea.
But it was.
The pages are yellow.
And his sister must have brought it when they came from Switzerland, because
yeah, I didn't know
it's the only thing, and we did not know anything about it. Of course, she was gone for years before that. So we're still wondering how it got there.
Wow, that's incredible that it got to you.
Yeah.
And your sister, what was her name? Sarah can share a picture of your sister, but Jacqueline was wondering what your sister's name was.
Her name was Lori Levy, and she was 8 years older than I was. So she was 17 when we arrived in Milwaukee. She went to Riverside High School. She was very bright. She went to Riverside High School. I mean, they didn't know the language either, of course, just any more than I did. But
no, you left off with Riverside.
oh, that you heard that one. Okay. She was at Riverside High School for 1 year. She caught up to the years that she didn't go to school. It was 3 or 4 years, and graduated in 1 year. And then she met the love of her life, who was also from Germany, and they got married very quickly. And you know the rest of the story.
I don't know if you heard me say that when they were in the camps, she became like a little mother to him after they had left the camps. She was very mature and took care of him.
Well, she sounded like a wonderful person, and
She was the best person ever. I mean that.
We miss her very much.
And although this question isn't directed to you, Werner, this was asked by Sam actually, and she said, what would you say to other high school students thinking about participating in this program? And to that, I'd say do it. It is such an amazing opportunity, not only to hear a survivor story, but to also get to know the survivor in general. I've gotten to know Carol and Werner over the past couple of months, and they are just lovely people. And the first time I heard your story, it changed something within me. I just want everyone who has a chance to do this to do it, because soon survivors won't be around and someone has to continue telling their story, and we're a part of the generation to do it.
I think that's wonderful, Ava.
That's very true, and we're very proud of you for doing this for not only us, but for the whole community. And every city, I'm sure, is doing something on this order. We're getting older, and in a few years we won't be around. The history books will have us there, but we don't know how many people are going to open the history books to to learn about something like this, because it was a horrible time for Jews all over the world, not just here, not just in Germany.
And right now we have so much anti-Semitism that
Yeah,
it's really important for what you're doing, Ava.
it's an important part.
Well, I'm truly honored to be able to do this, and I hope other people can in the future, maybe in person if COVID disappears. But until then, obviously online is the way to go. And either way, it was incredible. But speaking of interviews, have you been interviewed by either Yad Vashem or the Shoah Foundation to tell your story?
No.
I don't think so. Not those. We are on the.
He
I
was
was interviewed many years ago.
It's at the Jewish Museum.
You know the.
Yeah, she's familiar.
You're familiar with that.
And he was interviewed by Cole. They lived here for a while when he was running for an office.
David Cole?
No, Danny Cole. Dan Cole's wife. I can't think of her
Cole's wife.
name now. And she had interviewed him. That's quite a while ago.
That was at the JCC.
No. That was at the Jewish Museum.
Jewish music. Wow.
It's not the
Yeah,
same.
that's great.
So, but not the Shoah and not Yad Vashem. No.
No.
Okay. Well, our final question, I believe, is do you still speak or practice German at all?
I understand some German, but I can't write the German. And I received something written in a legal form from the German government recently, and I couldn't.
No, he can't translate it.
Couldn't
It's
translate it
very
anymore.
difficult because he didn't use it. You know, they say if you don't use it, you lose it.
When we were in Switzerland with the children and the extended family, visiting grave sites and going back to home and so forth. That was, I'm sorry, in Germany, not Switzerland, Germany. We had a guide who contacted me a few years before that. We got to know each other. He's the one that I sent to Berlin to look up the death dates of my parents when they actually died, because we wanted to put plaques up in synagogues with the right date on. And I said, and he was having trouble talking English, and I was having trouble talking German. I said, I'll tell you what, let's try it this way. I'll talk to you in German, and you can answer back to me in English. And he had a much better English than I had in German. So I said, let's go back to the way it was before. I'll talk to you in English, and then you know what I'm saying, and then you can talk to me.
So the answer is no. He can't really. He doesn't.
I can understand German
a little bit
yet, but it's too long. There was no one at home. My aunt and uncle spoke German with me when I first came with us. But then I said to them, I have to learn English. We have to start talking English together. And they got their English improved, and my German, my German went down in quality, and in being able to recite some of the things that I wanted to say.
But you didn't tell her that you spoke 5 languages when you came here.
Yeah, that's true. But when you're living in Europe, I mean, that's not that hard. That's not uncommon, because in Switzerland there are 4 sectors. There's a French, there's a German, and there's a Swiss, and there's an Italian. And when you cross the border, you have to know their language, because no one's going to talk to you otherwise. So it's really important. So those languages I knew when I came here, but there was nobody over there that spoke English. So but I picked up languages very quickly when I was young. It's too old for that now, though.
Well, thank you so much for answering the questions and just doing this interview. And a special thank you to Herc as well. This was an incredible program, and I am so happy to share with everyone and just have Werner share his story.
Thank you, Ava. And I warned you that I was going to ask you one of those questions. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to our first program of the series, Bridging History, Generational Conversations of the Holocaust. I'm Sam Goldberg, Director of Education at HERC. If you or a high school student you know would like to participate in this program, please reach out to Sarah Sillers at sarahs@milwaukeejewish.org. If you are a teacher looking for professional development opportunities or ways to engage your class in Holocaust education, please reach out to me at samg@milwaukeejewish.org. I would like to extend my appreciation to our co-sponsors for this evening's event, Nicolet High School and BBYO Wisconsin Region. And then just a quick reminder that today is Giving Tuesday. If you are able to, please consider making a donation to HERC by visiting our website at holocaustcentermilwaukee.org and clicking Make a Donation. Enjoy the rest of your evening.